Hey there, everyone. It's Alex here from Respec, and I want to talk to you today about this thing, the Xbox Series S, the baby of the current generation Xbox lineup. I'm always surprised when I think about how small this thing is, even though it's quite underpowered by the standards now versus when it launched, and it was pretty underpowered at launch. But whatever can be said about the last disastrous decade plus or so for Xbox, it can't also be said that the platform hasn't had some visionary ideas. I mean, think about the Xbox One. As Sony less pivots away from discs and more just unceremoniously obliterates the very idea of them, one might look back at the infamously inauspicious announcement of the Xbox One and admit perhaps they were just a little bit ahead of their time. And the same, I think, can now be true of the decision to split this console generation down the middle in power terms, offering two distinct performance profiles, but with a unified game library. That was a grand experiment that allowed Microsoft to offer what it then called the fastest and most powerful console ever in the form of the Series X, but also what I would call, at the time, the best value in gaming in the form of the cheaper Series S. Both would offer users access to next generation games. The choice was whether you wanted them at the blistering cutting edge or with a heavy technical compromise. Now, the idea obviously wasn't embraced by everybody. For the first few years of its existence, a common refrain anytime I'd end up in a pub with game developers would always be for the Series S to get a good kicking. It's totally fair to say that many devs utterly hated the device, simply because its power footprint meant it was a lot more difficult to develop for. In one case, I shared a beer with a prominent gaming figure, someone you'd know if I said their name, and they were lamenting how badly the Series S had delayed the release of the game, and not by a little bit, by a lot. Such was the burden of getting some games to run on it. Developers have my sympathies in this regard, but I also never entirely agreed with their assessment. As much of a pain as I know it became to develop for, I also felt the Series S had inherent value. It paired better with the Game Pass-focused business model of Xbox at the time. Like, the concept of the less powerful Xbox for Game Pass subscription was, I felt, really, really, really good value. I also, and I know it's all anecdotal, I saw it work in places. Several semi-lapsed gamer friends, now too busy to follow the hobby closely, still ended up with their gaming lives powered by that exact combination. Others I know who, for some reason, were inherently resistant to a Switch, used the Series S as a console for their kids, exploiting the Game Pass library of titles starring the likes of Peppa Pig and Bluey. There's also the fringe cases for the hardcore users, which is sort of how I use the Series S. Like, this one here is from my living room. Obviously, doing this job for a living, there's no way I'm using this as my main machine. But something I could do and did do was have a spare one in the living room. So here in my office, I've got my main stuff. So I look over here and I've got my PS5, my Switch 2, a range of retro consoles, and then my Series X right on the end. And that's my main gaming setup. But I would use this for easy play in the communal area of the house. We'd use it for Jackbox party games. We'd use it for Rock Band. We'd use it basically when guests come around. The stuff that's installed on that is all multiplayer stuff. It's all Street Fighters and things like that. So you could very easily turn it on and play stuff with guests or with the rest of the family who don't care about 4K 60. And that was the point. The Series S worked in those instances for people who didn't care about the cutting edge of games as much and wanted to stay attached to games a little bit as their lives expanded and it became harder for them to stay in the hobby. And at £250 or $300, the Series S was particularly accessible and doubtless attractive to many players who simply didn't really care all that much about if they were playing at 1080p or if the frame rate was sub 60, or, as I said, as a secondary device. Now, in our bubble of hardcore gamers, steeped in the internet Discord and worshipping at the temple of Digital Foundry, love you guys, it's easy to forget, though, that there's a truly massive cohort of people who truly do not care about this stuff. I mean, true enough, I know. These are also people who might leave their TV's motion smoothing guff turned on. Pass me the sick bucket. But these people are nevertheless potential gamers, and for the sake of the industry, in a time when things are getting tighter and getting tougher, we want these people, as many people as possible, to continue to engage with video games. Now, with all this said, I can't exactly argue that it was earth-shatteringly successful. Microsoft did, to be fair, sell a hell of a lot of Series S machines, and my understanding of the sales figures and the split is early on, the split between the two was less weighted in favor of the Series X, in favor of the more expensive machine than they had predicted. They were selling more Series S consoles than they thought they would. But in the grip of a truly disastrous generation across the board, the idea arguably couldn't truly establish itself. Microsoft was having a bad generation, so everything was going to have a bad generation. And now, for various reasons, including that, here we are 6 years later, and this grand experiment seems like it's dead. With the news that the Series S has now risen in price to £430 or $500, the cheap and affordable entry-level console with compromised performance is now effectively the same price that the all the bells and whistles record-breaking powerhouse was in 2020. Even when you take into account that a Series X is now a truly deranged-sounding £620, and let's be clear, that's without the disk drive, which they all had at launch. With the disk drive, they're $670. Anyway, the point is, the situation doesn't improve. Neither price is particularly attractive, even to hardcore, leave alone to casuals. And even if we adjust for today's also ridiculous levels of inflation, £250 in 2020 tracks to around £330 now. So after several price rises, this is no longer looking like a top value thing, is it? It's looking just obscene. Writing about games for a living, it's relatively common that less versed friends and relatives will approach me for advice on what to get for themselves or for their kids or what have you. And depending on their circumstances, quality and the size of their TV, their personal predilections, it was really easy a lot of the time for me to recommend the Series S in many, many circumstances. In difficult financial times, for many people, a three-figure saving would be a fair trade-off for dips in resolution and frame rate. Based on this, I'd long thought that the release of GTA 6 might prove to be a pivotal moment for the Series S. Think about how many people are going to want to buy a console just for GTA and want to do it as cheaply as possible. And then imagine how that'd go in a world where the Series S is $250, $300 and, it's readily available. I think that'd be pretty great for Microsoft and for the industry. But no. Now, the Series S will indeed still be the cheapest way to play GTA 6 this November, though by the thinnest of a margin. There's 90 quid in it now between a Series S and the cheapest version of the PS5. With that in mind, and considering the price brackets, where you're now talking 400 something rather than 200 something, and when you consider the bang for the buck involved at that price point, I find I can no longer really recommend the Series S to my casual gamer acquaintances in good conscience. I'd advise them to save another 90 quid and get the PS5 or wait for the prices to come down. Now, this ultimately is part of a wider and alarming narrative. Gaming is becoming more expensive and is in turn becoming a hobby for people with money. Matt Piscatella of the consumer analysis company Circana did some brilliant posts on Blue Sky where he noted that in the last quarter of 2025, 53% of gaming hardware buyers had a household income in excess of $100,000. That's up significantly from 40% just a few years prior. So you can see the people who are buying games are people with more money. The percentage of people who have got a fair amount of middle-class income buying games is going up, and the percentage of people who are on lower incomes buying games is going down. And that's dangerous. And the demise of the noble idea of the Series S, a cheaper console that could dramatically expand the potential player base, get people in the door and into our hobby at a reasonable price, that's a warning bell. That's an alarm. That's a siren of impending danger of many millions of users simply being priced out of console gaming entirely. Now, for Xbox parent Microsoft, the optics are pretty comical, I have to admit. Like, these price rises are driven in part by a component crisis that is fueled for the most part by AI expansion, something Microsoft itself is helping to drive with its aggressive pursuit of intelligent agents and all this other nonsense. Hearing Xbox executives talk about gaming being too expensive and waxing lyrical about finding the spiraling component costs frightening, it's got the air of a guy in a hot dog suit about it, really.
Someone drove a hot dog-shaped car through the window.
They could have killed someone.
Who Whose car is this?
Yeah, come on. Whoever did this, just confess. We promise we won't be mad.
But this problem is coming for us all. From Valve being forced to hike the price of the Steam machine before it had even launched, to Nintendo prices clambering, or the eye-watering rumors about the potential price point of a PlayStation 6, it all seems worse than ever. And as prices rise ever higher, the value in a simpler, cheaper machine that can play all the newest games in a compromised state appears more clever than ever. I think they were ahead of the times. But it also appears to be completely non-viable. What a mess we are in. And I see no end in sight. So that was a cheery note to end on. Thank you for joining me for this hot take. This is an adaptation of a written article that you can read on respec, respec.net, our website. But I wanted to do a video version, a spoken word version, and you'll probably see a little bit more of this from us. So if you enjoyed this, please do give us a like, give us a subscribe, ring the bell, the YouTube nonsense that we talk about. But also visit the website. And please don't forget, we have a Patreon where you can back us, you can support independent games media, help us to pay lots of really exciting and talented freelancers to talk about games. You also get a warm, fuzzy feeling inside knowing you are supporting independent media rather than media owned by great big corporations that don't have the best interests of gamers or writers or critics or anyone at heart. So that's it from me for this one. Thanks again. See you next time.